It is Wednesday, my dudes. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Wednesday, time for another one-off. So, if you're new here, as I suspect some of you might be based on how I'm gonna market this video, welcome. This is something I do, just a creative writing outlet for the week. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. Please share this with your friends if you're enjoying it. I really am myself. That being said, we're gonna get right into the one-off. Quick warning, again, for most of the people who are here, there is one swear word. Sorry about that. Not much I can do. Character stuff. If you want more of an explanation, go check out the ending of One Off Wednesday number 3. That being said, let's get into the video.
Adolf is my favorite student by Jonathan Howe. Read to you by Jonathan Howe. Dedication. This goes out to all the teachers in my life, specifically my mother and my grandmother. Nana, if you're watching this in heaven, Adolf would be your favorite student too. Adolf is my favorite student. Nobody in class knows this is his name, and for good reason. I don't know if you've been around a class of 6th graders, but they can be vicious. On the first day of class, the first student into my room was Adolf. "Hi, Mrs. Rock," he said as he quickly walked to my desk. "Good morning," I replied, checking my class list. "You must be Patrick Fisher," he said, cutting me off. He leaned in closer to my desk. "I prefer to go by my middle name, if you don't mind." I scanned the list and found him. Adolf Patrick Fisher. I met his eyes and smiled sadly. "I understand, but are you sure?" He gave me a knowing, tired look. "Mrs. Rock, I transferred schools for a reason." The reason clearly had nothing to do with Adolf. It took me less than a day to realize he'd be my favorite. Adolf was smart, liked to raise his hand, and did his work. Notice I didn't say anything about quiet. Adolf is not a quiet child. When he has an answer, everyone can hear him, as well as when he has a joke. He has quite a few jokes. To his credit, at least 3 of them are funny. I enjoy funny students, but more importantly, students who aren't afraid to be themselves. Unless that person was my least favorite student. Jesus is my least favorite student. He could do with a little less being himself. The reasoning is that himself is arrogant, rude, uncooperative, and very showmanly. He'll make a wonderful politician someday, I thought to myself, after a particularly awful interaction which ended with me sending Jesus to the principal's office on the first day. The continuation of the school year only deepened my convictions about both boys. Adolf, yes, I called him Patrick in class, grew in wit and comedic timing, while Jesus grew in sheer pigheadedness. By the 3rd month, both were spending equal amounts of time outside my class. Adolf because he was helping in younger classrooms, and Jesus because he was in the office. I watched Adolf grow in kindness to everyone around him. Not only did he help younger grades after finishing his in-class work, but he helped wherever he could. In the library, he put books back. In the cafeteria, he cleaned up spills. In our own class, he helped out other students. One day I asked him why he helped all the time. "I have nothing better to do," he shrugged. I furrowed my eyebrows. "What about reading?" I asked him. He shrugged. "It's fun, but it can wait. I can read at home." He met my eyes, his expression begging me to drop the questions. I did, but after that, I didn't let him help out as much. He still did things because he wanted to, but occasionally when he asked to go help a class, I sent him to the cushion corner to read instead. He never complained. As long as I told him to do it, Adolf was willing to stop focusing on others. If only Jesus was willing to do what I asked of him at all. A failing of the American public school system is our inability to hold children back. Jesus had quite literally not turned in a single assignment, and yet if he kept this up, I would need to push him to junior high. He'd very quickly lost laptop privileges in the first week, and therefore spent most of his time drawing, or sitting at his desk twiddling his thumbs. "Jesus, do your parents know what you do at school?" I asked him once. "Yeah, I stay out of my mom's hair until you guys kick me out." The reality of his statement hurt and frustrated me. Jesus was my least favorite student because there wasn't anything I could do to motivate him or punish him. He truly didn't care. Students like Jesus made classroom management a hassle. As soon as I set students to do a task, he set himself to distract anyone who'd pay attention. Students like Adolf made my classroom management better, sort of. Mrs. Rock, Jesus won't leave me and Macy alone, he informed me. I set them out to work on pairs on an assignment, and immediately Jesus had become a problem. Do you think you can handle it on your own? I asked him. If it were just myself, but Jesus keeps making fat jokes. At Macy? Adolf grimaced. Not at her. They're pointed yo mama jokes, but they're making her uncomfortable. I smiled wanly. There he goes again, working to help others. I'll see what I can do, I told him. Unfortunately, that incident set Adolf in Jesus' sights. Jesus took all his wayward energy and focused it on bullying Adolf. I did everything I could to mitigate the antagonizing, going as far as letting Adolf go to other classes more often, but it still got worse. I found multiple notes written in Jesus' poor handwriting, calling him Fatrick or Patprick. Despite finding papers, without seeing it for myself, I couldn't do anything. Every time I called Jesus on his behavior, he just acted as if he didn't know anything. Ladies and gentlemen, if your child, niece/nephew, grandkid, etc. is always around trouble, yet always has the perfect alibi every time, they're a monster. All children are devious, and they know what they're doing, but some never grow out of it. Jesus had never grown up at all. He was a giant 2-year-old in my classroom of 6th graders. In contrast, Adolf was like a high schooler, having grown a few years more than the other kids. He weathered Jesus' bullying as if the other students didn't exist. He was still his funny, loud, smart, and helpful self. Everything came to a head at the beginning of the 3rd trimester, around the end of March. I got sick, which is never a good time for teachers, and it was bad enough that I had to take a day off. When I came back, the first thing I noticed was a stiffness to Adolf's posture. He walked into the room quickly, sat at his desk, and stuck his nose in a book. I wanted to go over and talk to him, but I was too busy checking over the notes left by the sub, preparing for the day. When Jesus entered the room, he walked like he owned the classroom. Upon seeing me in my usual spot, his expression darkened. He sneered over to Adolf, but took his seat as per usual. Adolf didn't crack a joke. He barely answered any questions. That day, he did his work quietly, then proceeded to read. When I tried to ask him what happened the day before, he deflected the question. The substitute was fine, he said, keeping his tone controlled. When I tried to ask Macy, she wasn't much help either, but I did hear from her that Jesus had been picking on Patrick all the day before. Knowing I wouldn't get anything out of the other students, I took matters into my own hands. During math, I set the kids to do a worksheet and began helping students. I specifically placed my back to Adolf, giving Jesus a chance to move. Seeing as Jesus had the strategic planning of a toddler, he fell right into my trap. How was your evening, Hitler? Jesus sneered behind me. I spun instantly, so fast that the entire class jumped. What did you say? I accused. Jesus looked stunned. I didn't say anything, he stammered. I heard you say something, I said louder, so say it again to my face. Jesus shook his head dumbly. My nostrils flared and my lips tightened as I took a long, shuddering breath. Patrick, what did he say to you? Adolf looked into his book. He called me Hitler. The room was silent. Is this true? I glared at Jesus. I knew the answer, but I wanted to see if he would cave and admit it. No, Jesus scoffed. Adolf's lying. Who's lying? I asked. I'd never called him Adolf once the whole year. Jesus paled, realizing his mistake. He is, Jesus said, still not admitting fault. I pointed to the door. Get out of my class. But I didn't do anything, Jesus argued, trying to seem innocent. Get out of my classroom or I will call your mother right now. Does she need to leave work to come pick you up? Jesus' face went dark, but he trudged out of the classroom. I called the office to send someone to find him, knowing Jesus would run amok unless found. When it was all settled, the other students were working on math. I called Adolf back to my desk. The sub used your first name, didn't they? He looked down, nodding. I sighed angrily, rifling through the papers on the desk. Not that this can help now, but I tried to stop this, I said, showing Adolf the very clear note that instructed the sub to call him Patrick. He shrugged, nonplussed. You didn't do anything wrong. I met his gaze. The spark in his eye was gone. I wanted to tell him to ignore Jesus, that his name wasn't something to be ashamed of, but I didn't know. My name was Carrie, for goodness sakes. I had no clue what it was like to be ashamed of my name. You can go back to your reading, I told him. Despite my best attempts, the principal sent Jesus back to class after lunch. I'd moved his desk to be right next to my teaching podium, and he wasn't allowed to say or do anything. Clearly, you can't be trusted to tell the truth, so I have to keep my eye on you the entire day. Jesus thought I was bluffing. I was not bluffing. The next day, he came back and tried to move his desk. I informed him that he was staying where I put him. He stayed right there for the next week, and the week after. At the same time, Adolf got slightly better. During the class, he reverted mostly to his old self, but after lunch and recess, a time when I couldn't watch Jesus, Adolf would come back, looking tired and frustrated. In the beginning of April, during a rainy day recess, Jesus found his moment to retaliate. I'd been distracted by my own lunch and assumed Jesus would be similarly enticed. While reading a book and eating my food, I heard a loud crash. I looked up, startled, to find Adolf sitting on top of Jesus, punching him in the face. A good teacher would have stopped the fray immediately. I pretended to be a frazzled teacher, allowing Adolf another punch or so. He is my favorite student, after all, even though I didn't know why he was punching Jesus. When I'd gotten the two separated, I sent Adolf to the principal's office with his laptop, which sat open on his desk, oddly. Once he was gone, I knew he'd go without issues. I made Jesus stand. Why did Patrick punch you? Don't you mean Adolf? Jesus sneered. I narrowed my eyes, not responding. I don't know, he said. Maybe he's just violent. We both know he punched you for a reason, I told him. Especially since you were over by his desk, a place you weren't supposed to be. Jesus looked away. I didn't do anything, he repeated. I sighed in exasperation. Did anyone else see what happened and want to tell me what Jesus did? I asked the class. Jesus glared around and no one answered. Really? I asked. No one met my eye. You all are more afraid of him than you are of me? A few students raised their hands, the ones who were too far away from the event to have info, so I ignored them. The students nearby, who could have seen, all stayed silent. Fine. Everyone go back to your seats. Recess is over. But they started to complain, but I stopped them. Either someone tells me what happened or recess is over, as well as anything nice in this classroom. The students shifted nervously, looking to one another. Finally, Macy called out. Jesus was calling Patrick names like Nazi boy and Hitler again. Macy, you bitch, Jesus hissed. Get out! I screamed. Jesus looked at me, fear in his eyes. Students had never heard me scream like this. But Jesus, get out of my classroom now! He left immediately. When the dust had settled and Jesus was being handled by the office, I sent the students to work quietly. Someone had told me, but the day wasn't going to be fun for the rest of them. As they read at their seats, I sat checking my correspondence to deal with the two boys. One email stood out in particular. Adolf had sent me a file labeled The Incident. When I opened it, I found a video from his front-facing camera, which documented the whole event. Jesus had approached Adolf, who tried his best to ignore the boy. Why are you ignoring me, Nazi boy? Jesus jeered. Adolf didn't say anything. Jesus shot his hand forward and grabbed a cookie from Adolf's lunch. Hey, Adolf said, but stopped, clearly trying to control his emotions. What are you gonna do, Hitler? Tell the teacher on me? Please leave me alone, Adolf told him. You're at my desk. Or what, Jesus said. Are you gonna kill all Mexicans because you hate me? Jesus, that isn't funny, Adolf said, anger sparking in his eyes. Oh no, Jesus mocked. Hitler is mad at me. Now he's gonna kill everyone because he's weak. I'm not weak, Adolf hissed through clenched teeth. Jesus grinned devilishly, seeing he'd picked a nerve. Weak little Hitler boy wants to kill all Mexicans, but he can't. That's when Adolf had enough and punched Jesus. I took the video to the principal as my evidence for sending Jesus out as well. Adolf got an out-of-school suspension for 3 days. I gave him top marks on all the assignments he missed, not that he wouldn't have gotten them anyways. Jesus got a 3-day in-school suspension. I didn't even grade any of his papers, not that he was going to do them anyways. I only made them do one assignment while they were gone. I tasked both boys with a report on the meaning of their name. On the day they both came back to class, the first order of business was the boys presenting their reports. By luck of a coin flip, Jesus was chosen to go first. "My name is Jesus. It comes from Latin. It means the Lord saves," he said with no emotion, as if reading off a Wikipedia page. "One famous person with the same name is Jesus Christ. I want people to think of strength when they hear the name Jesus." The class clapped politely. Then it was Adolf's turn. "My name," he started nervously, "is Adolf Patrick Fischer. My first name is of German origin, and it was my great-grandfather's name." Adolf had prepared slides, the first slide showing a family tree going all the way back to the last Adolf Fischer. "In Old German, it means noble or majestic wolf," he explained, going to the next slide. "There's been one major historical person named Adolf, but a few others exist." He went to the next slide, listing some other famous Adolfs. "When people hear the name Adolf," he said, "I want them to think of my kindness." The class burst into applause, and Adolf smiled nervously as he sat down. When I got up to the front, I quieted everyone down. "All right," I said, "for the rest of you, your assignment is to write a quick summary on what one of the names means to you. I will be the only person reading them, and you will sit out the rest of recess if you try to show your friends. Does everyone understand?" They all nodded, pulling out a paper and getting to work. For the rest of the year, Adolf returned to his normal self, with one notable exception. People were allowed to call him Adolf. Jesus didn't bother him anymore, mainly because it didn't bug Adolf the same way when Jesus tried to jab at him about the name. Students being willing to accept his name as his own had done Adolf a good turn. He returned to joking, doing his work, and being loud. When the end of the year came, I broke my word to the class. I compiled the summaries written by students about what Adolf meant to them. I made the notes anonymous, but I put them in a document, and I printed it out, along with a letter for Adolf. It is worth mentioning not a single student told me what the name Jesus meant to them. On the last day of school, I gave Adolf the sealed paper and the letter. He looked up to me confused. "What is this?" "Just something that belongs to you," I told him. "Don't open it until you get home." He gave me a weird look, but put the envelope in his backpack. "Thanks for a good year, Adolf." "You too, Mrs. Rock," he smiled. Dear Adolf Patrick Fischer, you are funny. You are smart. You care about other people. When I think about the name Adolf, I think about how you treat people. Despite what other more cruel people with the same name might have done, it is not a bad name. You are not a bad person. Names, like words, only have the power we give them. Their definitions are based on the people we know. You are one of the best students I've had, so Adolf means good student to me. It means so many things to so many people because of your character. Your name doesn't define you, you define your name. I hope someday you never hear anything about Hitler again, because all the people around you are too busy enjoying the person that you are. Sincerely, Carrie Rock.
And we're back. So I have a lot of things about this one that made me want to write Adolf is my favorite student. The first of these being that when you're writing in fantasy, everyone loves to talk about names and what you're gonna do and how do you pick names. You might ask Donald, how do you pick names? I pick them. I choose a writing style motif that would fit for the characters and the place they're in, and I pick a name and I go with it. Why do I put in so little effort? Because our names aren't something that define us. I don't get to be named Internet Funny Guy when I'm a kid and that turns me into an Internet Funny Guy. It would be if I wanted to be an Internet Funny Guy, I do it, and if that's who I am, when people hear Jonald, they think Internet Funny Guy. So I think there's no point in wasting time trying to pick our names for the characters we're writing, because what's the point? When you meet someone and their name is Jared, you don't go, oh, your parents named you Jared because they wanted you to be blah, blah, blah. They named him Jared because they like Jared, and Jared means whatever the Jared you know is like. So don't try so hard when you're picking your names. That being said, if you're a parent and you name your child Adolf, why? You know, you don't do that. It's only the 21st century. Give it time. But that being said, that's my main reason. And then I worked as a substitute teacher. My mom, my grandmother who recently passed were also, well, my grandmother is the one who recently passed. My mom's still alive. Hi, Mom. They're all teachers. And so I just have that kind of in my veins, in my blood. And so I wanted to write a story about that kind of resonated with them. If you like this, please come back next week for One Off Wednesday 6. The other videos are going to be on the end card. And thanks for watching. Neat, goodbye.